Welcome to Mi Gente on Air on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online WSGW.com. Now, here is your host, Larry Rodarte.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being with me here on Mi Gente on Air. I am your host, Larry Rodarte, and I have a very special guest today. We're going to talk about what's going on in our country, in the United States of America, in April of 2026. But I want to welcome everybody to come on into the room here and just kind of get a sense of, where we are today in April 10th, 2026. I hope everyone is well. And, what's on everybody's mind right now is, of course, the Iran war, as well as the economy that's happening in the United States. It's a difficult time for many of us here in the Great Lakes Bay region. And today I have former Undersecretary Jose Fernandez, who was the Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment at the Department of State under President Joe Biden. And he's here to discuss the war with Iran and what it means to U.S. families, particularly as concerns rise around gas prices. Wow, we're at around $4.10 here in Saginaw, and of course the cost of living, and it is great concern for all of us as we march into spring and look forward to summer. And so I just want to, bring this show to everybody because I know it's on everybody's mind these days. Everybody's talking about it, and the recent announcement yesterday of kind of about automatic registration for young men between 18 to 22. It's got everybody in an uproar. So please help me welcome the former Undersecretary Jose Fernandez is with us today. Hello, bienvenidos. How are you, sir?
Gracias. Great to be here and great to talk to your audience in the great state of Michigan.
Yes. And do you have any connection to Michigan? You said because of your former position and all, you did come to Michigan. Was it Detroit?
I spent a lot of time in Michigan, in the Biden administration in Detroit, talking to the car companies when we were dealing with things like the Inflation Reduction Act on electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Then I went to Mackinac.
Oh, beautiful.
I went there you have a big political conference, and they asked me to speak. And then I spent some time in Dearborn.
Oh, wow.
Speaking to your Muslim community, really talking about some of the painful issues that we talked about. These are people that I had worked with in my previous time in government, and it was this was a time for friends to reunite and also to talk about what was happening around the world. So Michigan is a place that's very dear to me, and hopefully I'll get a chance to go back.
Well, many times when I have guests on here, just to get your background information, because it's Latino-based, I really think it's important to this show today that we understand where you actually come from. And I want you to be able to express that. And, in 1967, you came to America. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
So I was born in Cuba, and we came to this country. I was born, and as a kid, I lived in a place called Cienfuegos in Cuba. It's in the middle of Cuba. One of my earliest memories, it's very close to the Bay of Pigs, so one of my earliest memories was hearing the bombing during the Bay of Pigs. And I'll tell you, I know it's outside of what we're talking about today, but you never forget the whistling sounds of a bomb, not knowing where it's going to land. And so, we came to this country at the age of 11. I didn't know English. My mother, in those days, there were lots of clothing factories in New Jersey. That's where we settled. Cubans typically settle in either Miami or New Jersey. And my father worked in a bank. My mother was a factory worker, and that's where I grew up. And to this day, when people ask me where you grew up, I don't really say Cuba. I say New Jersey. And then from there, college, law school. I worked for many years in New York as a corporate lawyer. Then at some point, Larry, I decided I wanted to do something in government, public service. And so during Obama, I spent 5 years at the State Department
Yes.
as Assistant Secretary under Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. And then when Biden came back, I was asked to serve as Undersecretary to do things, little things like working on the on climate change, working on electric vehicles, wind power, working on sanctions and the like. So
Little things. That don't sound like little things.
It's a privilege,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you, I missed my family. I came home every weekend, but it's a real privilege, really, to be able to do public service and to have that opportunity. And one of the things we can get into if you like is how the government workers have been really minimized. And the people that I met, you've got all kinds, but for the most part, these are folks who could work and get more money outside of government, and yet they wanted to do something for the community.
You wanted to
So
serve their
anyway,
country.
that's my background.
Well, when you talked about Bay of Pigs and all, I mean, that's really historical. I mean, when I look at that, and I wasn't around at the time, but John F. Kennedy was assassinated. You come into the United States of America at that time when there was a vast change. Do you remember that time vividly? I'm just asking because I'm a historian by nature, and I just love to hear some of that background because you were right in the thick of it in Cuba.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I was 11 when I came, and I tell people, and it's hard for them to believe, and it's as a father, I've come to admire this more and more. I had a great childhood, man.
Yeah.
I played baseball every day of the year. I went swimming. I had teachers who liked me, and my parents kept me away from some of the horrors that were happening in Cuba.
Yeah.
We tried to keep a normal lifestyle at the home, although what was happening was clearly affecting me. When we came, so I'm someone who looks back on those first 11 years, and I'm very grateful to my family. I'm very grateful to my parents. And when we came here, we came with nothing, and like a lot of immigrants, not just from Cuba, but from all over the world. And there were great opportunities. I had teachers who helped me out. I had coaches. I ended up playing basketball in college and in high school, who just really believed in me. And so I've been blessed. I have not, like a lot of us, we've been called names. We've had some things where people were mean to us. But overall, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I was given here. And college for me was like an eye opener. 5-6 years before, I had been being fed, and this is not an exaggeration, at a soup kitchen for the first few weeks that we were here. Mm-hmm. And to think that 6 years later I was at an Ivy League school getting a scholarship was just like, I realized how fortunate that was, and that the important thing there is, and yet it's yet another conversation. It's the benefits of immigration, and also the importance of welcoming others, and also making sure that once they're here, they have the opportunities to help all of us to sort of thrive and also improve the lives of others. So I'm sure that's going to get us at some point into the political world today.
Yeah.
But I have great memories of my childhood, great gratitude, as frankly a lot of differences with what's going on now.
Yeah. Well, you failed to mention that you are a magna cum laude graduate of Dartmouth College, and so I want to definitely set that up there because to come to the United States as an immigrant and then to exceed where you have, it's kind of understandable why President Obama tapped you at that time afterwards, and you have landed the positions that you have in the last decade or so.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
congratulations to that. But you talked about minimized government, and before I forget about that, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because under this current administration, we have seen a vastly different administration from the previous administrations of this country. So, can you elaborate a little bit on what you meant by that when you said?
So look, again, I came from the private sector. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I had spent 30 years working on Wall Street, where you could be a nice guy, but really what counts is what you can do for clients and how you can make others and their businesses do well. So there's not a lot of sentimentality where I came from, but you go into government, and for the most part, okay, I mean, there are people like in any place else who are just sort of treading water and hoping that they could just earn a paycheck and go home. But for the most part, there's a reason why these people are there. I had PhDs. This is sort of part of my. When I looked at myself at the end of the day, I knew that I was very lucky. I had PhDs, half a dozen of them in my office, whose only job was to make me look smart. So if I came in one day, I said I need to know about what's happening with subsea mining. All of a sudden, I would have 3 or 4 people who the next day would give me a memo and would sit with me. And then I got I went to a meeting at the White House, and you know what? I mean, I sounded pretty smart, and I sounded intelligent, and I was prepared, and I could make, I think, the right choices. That is the kind of devotion, the kind of knowledge that it takes decades to build. And what you're seeing now is, you had Trump, and you had Musk, and you had others who the first day just fired these people, and that you see that now. I mean, right now for example, at some point we'll talk about Iran. I'm sure today, the people who are negotiating with the government now don't speak Farsi, don't speak the language, don't really know much about Iran. And so they're making assumptions, they're talking about things that have no basis in reality. That is, like in every institution, be it a university, be it a business, has what's called institutional memory, and has the memory and the learning that's been gathered for the last few decades. That's been lost.
Yeah.
And every day I get an email from somebody who's been let go, not for doing anything wrong, but simply because they just want to cut the government. And I'll tell you, it just decimates the Foreign Service, and that's going to take a long time to build back up. And how we do that, I think, is one of the questions that I think at some point we're going to have to talk about. How do you rebuild? How do you put the genie back in the bottle? That's not going to be easy.
Yeah, that's really concerning too. Well, you mentioned Iran, and a recent economic poll shows that 59% of Americans oppose war with Iran, including 61% of Hispanics. Those are huge numbers, and we are at a time where the polarization of our country is even greater, and with this Iranian war, it seems like the divide is even getting bigger. What can you tell me about it from your perspective as former undersecretary?
Look, this was an unnecessary, badly planned, and highly costly, and will be a highly costly war. Let's leave aside the fact that we had a deal with Iran on nuclear weapons. That you talk to people, and there were many who didn't like it, but at the end of the day, Iran was complying with it. And so, with all of the objectives that Trump has talked about that he wanted to achieve in this war, to basically get nuclear weapons from Iran, to eliminate Iran's ability to threaten its neighbors, to get rid of Hezbollah, Hamas, to eliminate the naval forces and protect the Strait of Hormuz, to get rid of the regime. None of those have been accomplished by Trump. He told us it'd be a couple of weeks. It wasn't, and this is what happens when you mix. Frankly, I'll be frank with this: ignorance and arrogance. He thought this would be a cakewalk. Well, it's costing us $1 billion by public estimates. $1 billion a day is what the war is costing us. We didn't get congressional approval for it. We didn't consult with our allies, although now we're asking them for help, and no wonder that they are saying no, because no one ever, would the U.S. Put people in danger in a war that they just learned about in the newspaper or in a tweet. So we didn't consult our allies. It's dividing. It's keeping us from putting our attention where it should be, which is in Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this gets to your question. The cost keeps skyrocketing. Today, as you know, we got the numbers for March. Inflation has jumped 1 full percent, basically from 2.4 to 3.3. They're talking about gas prices by the end of April. Average in the U.S. will be in the neighborhood of $4.30 a gallon, and not just gas at the pump, but fertilizers are made from petroleum, a lot of it. So our food security is going to be threatened because that's going to be more expensive. Transportation will be more expensive. Plastic, the stuff we use every day, that's made out of petroleum. Well, guess what? That's going to go up in price as well. And all of this, while Trump talks about having a truce with Iran, and then the next day Iran says, no, we didn't talk about shutting off the strait, and Israel is saying, no one told me that I didn't have to keep bombing Lebanon. So it's like a Keystone Cops situation. The first thing you would do when you do an agreement is you figure out who's bound by it. Well, is Israel bound by it? You'd figure out, if you buy a house, what the limits of your property are. Does it include Lebanon or not? You would figure out if you can go through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, as of today, apparently only one ship in the last 2 days has gone through the Strait of Hormuz, and no one's really sure of that, versus 134 ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz every day. 20% wow. of the world's oil supply goes, 1 out of 5 gallons of oil consumed in the world go through the Strait of Hormuz. That's what we are, and we've got a problem for a war that, again, his own advisors told Trump was unnecessary, and we're feeling the consequences in the wallet, and also I think in our security around the world.
Yeah. I'm sure that for every American, it's a very concerning time. For Latino Americans, I think they may not understand exactly what's happening overseas there, but they're more concerned really with the economy here and how it's affecting them and their families. And it is going to affect, it is already affecting, I believe, like you have just mentioned, because of the, you mentioned the gas prices and on and all. Do you see that the tensions that are happening over there, as well as the decisions made, are going to affect us even more so as we head into summer?
Yes, and
that's concerning
for a couple of reasons, Larry. Number one, the cost of energy takes a while to trickle through the economy.
Yeah.
So, for example, today we're signing, companies are signing contracts to buy petroleum 3 months from now. Those prices are being set today. Um, the experts, and this is not just me, the experts will tell you that it takes about 3 months for if you ended the war today and that the Strait of Hormuz was open, it would take 3 months for prices to come down. Why? Because you've got contracts. So you're looking in the best case scenario at a even if, which is not going to happen because the war is not going to stop today. You're looking at a 3 or 4 months of uncertainty at the pump. I mentioned fertilizers. That's going to affect the cost of food, transport. You're seeing what airline tickets are costing, and so that's on the direct cost side. But then you have sort of a real, I think something that we need to keep in mind, and I think Latinos, we need to, Latinos in this country are not normally the billionaires and trillionaires, right?
Right.
So we spend a lot higher percentage of our money on food, on basic stuff. We don't, a lot of us don't get to put it in the bank. And what Trump has done, he has just asked for an increase of 40% in the defense budget for next year, 1.5 trillion with a T.
Wow.
Okay, that is the highest budget request in the history of the United States. What do you think that's going to come from?
Yeah.
That's going to come from the programs that we need, education, assistance. So all of those things are going to come back to hurt us.
We are going into commercial right now. We will be right back with former Undersecretary Jose Fernandez, and we're going to talk more about what's happening in our world. Don't go nowhere. No te vayas.
$4.99.
This is Mi Gente on Air on WSGW.
Welcome back. I am your host, Larry Rodarte, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today on Mi Gente on Air as we talk about concerns of the Latino community in the Great Lakes Bay region. Today, my guest is former Undersecretary Jose Fernandez, a Cuban-American who is sharing with us what his outtake is in regards to the current administration's policies, as well as the Iranian war and the economy and how it's affecting Americans today. And I earlier mentioned, how does he see this in regards to what Latino Americans are feeling? We are feeling the impact. And as he said, food is always a big thing with Latinos. We have food trucks today making great tacos out there in our communities and all. And so how, Secretary Fernandez, how do you see this affecting the Latinos in, say, a state like Michigan here, where we have a lot of the migrant crops that are being grown?
Look, your fertilizer is going to go up. Your food prices are going to go up. Your ingredients are going to go up. Inflation is going to go up. All that's going to cut down on your ability to feed your family and to pay for the things that you need on a daily basis. But also, what's coming down the pike is, we saw the big, beautiful bill that basically gave a tax break to the top 10% in this country. That's gonna come out of the pockets of the other 90%. Well, there's not going to be money to make up for these programs, especially if you add defense to it. So I think what we need to do is to make sure that we restore some sanity to our government. That you don't go to war unless you've really thought about the consequences and unless you've made some planning, some basic assumptions. So I think I do think, and this is something that I talk to people a lot. I do believe Latinos, leave aside the immigration tragedy that's ongoing in our communities. I think Latinos have a role to play, and we can't stand back. We've got to be able to say to people, we came to this country seeking the promise of America. We believe in the promise of America, and we're going to make sure that promise remains. And so I think we, and then not just Latinos, but everybody else, has a role to play in making sure that we let our government officials know how we feel about this.
Do you see that there's any type of silver lining in regard to this? It's kind of bleak. We're looking at a time where, you mentioned there's no approval from Congress, and yet we're headed toward the midterms in 6 months. What do you think is going to happen in November?
I don't know. Something that Trump's election showed us is that people have short memories, Larry.
Yeah.
You didn't, I still remember, I'm from New York. I still remember him coming down the escalators at Trump Tower.
Yes.
Talking about, Latinos being scum. That hurt.
Yeah.
I see little kids now being separated from their parents. I see, Salvadorians being sent to Liberia. They don't even know where the hell Liberia is, and that's being done with a glee. It's like, they take pleasure.
Yeah.
In suffering, and they basically feel that if they make a community suffer enough, they won't come in, or they'll self-deport. They'll go home. So I think we've got to get our memories back to where they were. Amnesia is not an option here. And I think this is not an aberration. This is not a one-off thing. This is the policy of the Trump administration with respect to Latinos. They said, they're the only ones that they'll deport are the criminals. That's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what do we do? At some point, it's time for us to act. And at the very least, we've got to make sure that we do not believe the lies. Okay?
Yeah.
When somebody tells us that they're only going to deport the killers, the rapists, then we can either believe that, or we can say, the first time was your fault. The second time I was fooled was my fault. Let's not do it a second time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's you brought up when he came down those escalators, and I remember that in 2015, and I remember how the words that he said, how I felt at the time it was going to impact Latinos in our country. Because I knew he was talking about immigrants that, Mexico doesn't send their very best. No. But I knew that it was going to affect all Latinos eventually throughout our country. There wasn't going to be, in most people's minds, a separation, and they have villainized immigrants and migrants. And so I see today a really tough time for us in the United States of America. Even those like myself who are third, fourth generation, who only have known America as our country, and so it's really disheartening. It really hurts this time for many Latinos, and I think more and more are coming to that understanding now. Maybe even, with shows like this, who can bring forth, our understanding to the table of how we are feeling as a people, as a group of people. And I think that with the Iranian war and, like I mentioned, the announcement yesterday of in regards to automatic registration, do you think that there's going to be a turn in the tide in terms of Americans and how they actually feel about this administration, and more so, see it as maybe almost as a deflection as well from what has been, at his cusp of, the Epstein files?
Look, I think right now, Trump's poll numbers are in the toilet, right? They're in the 40%. The majority of Americans don't approve, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I also think that we've got to understand that we're not alone. You're in Michigan.
Yeah.
you have a huge and very influential Muslim, Arab American community. Not just Muslim, but from the Middle East. How do you think they feel when a couple of congressmen say that the U.S. is a Christian country, and that Islam is a primitive religion? That those people have no place in the United States. I know Arab Americans who called me when I would call them, when I would hear some of these things, and I would say, "Hey, I hope you're okay." They would say, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm an adult, but my son just went to school, and he was just insulted, and he came home crying."
Yeah.
That is not the place that we believe in, and so it's not just getting the Latinos in place. Understand that decency isn't. We don't have a monopoly among Latinos of decency and self-respect. Others are being affected as well. And so I think we've got to, first of all, remember, because, at some point, these guys are going to put on the sombrero, then put some salsa music on and say that they're more amigos than anybody else.
Yeah.
That's going to, at that point, you say, "Hey, man, I was born at night, but not last night." And so let's remember that and realize that we're not the only ones being affected by this.
Right.
Be it
Right.
be it Arab Americans, Latinos, be it anybody who has a school loan but can't pay the mortgage. This is not the America that we believe in, and so let's remember that, and it's going to come soon enough.
Yeah, and I have two nephews. They are 18. Well, actually, one is 20 today, and the other one is 22. I'm forgetting their age already, but 20 and 22. And I remember prior to the presidential election in November of 2024, I had a really deep discussion, argument with their mother, and she was an avid Trump supporter. And, I just reached out and asked, what are your feelings today? And through her son, one of her sons, he said she realizes she made a mistake. Do you think that there's going to be many who, whether it's MAGA or somebody who supported that election of President Trump a second term, do you think that he's going to be losing ground with so many of the, not only Latinos, but Americans?
Yeah, but I think I agree. I think people will reconsider. But I think we also need to address the issues that led those people to vote for Trump in the first place. We had inflation. We had inflation right after COVID. Well,
Yeah.
by the time that Trump left office, it was lower than it is now. And now, why did we have inflation? Well, one of the things that Biden did is he had a choice. He could either, during COVID, he could get he could see people lose their jobs and not have any money to pay their mortgage, or he could put some money in the market. He could provide funding to people. You know what? He knew that there was an inflation risk. He took the risk of inflation in order to be able to make sure that those people didn't go home hungry. But by the end of the term, inflation was down. On immigration, yes, some of it was a reaction to Trump's cruelty in his first term. By the end of the Biden administration, crossings were down as well. So some of this is, you got to go beyond the headlines.
Yeah.
And yes, we made mistakes, but you know what? We always had the best interests of people at heart, and we weren't looking to divide the country, and we weren't looking to make people suffer for following their dreams.
Yeah, and that's the cry, I think, of so many immigrants. The majority, when we talk about immigrants, so small of a percentage are those that are in criminals, that are rapists or whatever he had said coming down that escalator, and so many, as we know, and I'm sure your parents, my parents, all came with the intent of the better life for their children, for their grandchildren, and worked really hard, because that is one of the things that we are known for, is working very hard. And to see, how in this country, like overnight, it seemed, well, in the last year, where immigrants are being looked down upon now. How do you see that in the next couple of years, say once Trump is out of office? How do you see that plight of the immigrant change?
I'm concerned. Immigrants have built this country.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that you have some controls on immigration. No one contests that.
Right.
But I think you've got to look at people as human beings. And the one thing you can't do is have people who refuse to go to school, kids who refuse to go to school because they're afraid of being deported, parents who won't take their kids to school because they're afraid they're going to be stopped. I think we've got to have a discussion in this country, and it's a real discussion, and it's going to be a difficult discussion of the role of immigration in this country, but it can't be based on cruelty. It can't be based on not just cruelty, but just not following the rule of law. Putting people in prison, or having ICE officials, masked ICE officials, who knock on your door and don't even identify themselves.
Yeah,
that's illegal, man. That's just. I mean, having people break into a home without a judicial warrant. That's just basic,
yeah.
And it's being done intentionally. It's being done so that people are afraid, and so that shouldn't be the role of the government. We've got to maintain the dignity of human beings while we enforce some policies that, by the way, are not going to make everybody happy, and that's why it's going to be a difficult discussion. But it can't be based on cruelty and the absence of a legal system.
Yeah. Yesterday we seen the news about the Pope, in regards to Pope Leo, the American Pope, in regards to what he is saying in regards to the war and how the Pentagon, reacted. Do you think that as many Latinos are Catholic, and I know that within the Mexican community, in Mexico especially, as well as here in the United States, there are many, many followers of that denomination, and I'm sure there are many in the Cuban community. Do you think that will play a big part in regards to how maybe the mindset of Christian Latinos in this country will maybe change their position?
It should. I mean, I'm not the most religious person but the Pope has a conscience, and one of the roles of the Church is not just to talk to its followers, but to talk to our common conscience.
Yeah.
And I think what the Pope is talking about is what a number of religious officials have said, which is people deserve to be treated as human beings, and the kind of policies that we are following are inhumane.
Yeah.
And so I think it should affect them. But again, Larry, I think none of this is new. We knew this. This is the same guy who came down the escalator.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that he was in hiding the ball by the time, this. So I think we've got to remember this, and we've got to think about it. And yes, some of it is about the economy, but some of it is also about who we are as a country. I'll give you the last example. The other day we heard Trump saying that he was going to destroy an entire civilization, but unless Iran agreed by 8 p.m. to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. Larry, that saying that you're going to do that is a war crime. After the Holocaust, after World War II, there are treaties out there that say you cannot intentionally go after bridges, civilian infrastructure. You can't go after electric power plants. That is what Russia is doing when it bombs Ukraine.
Yes.
There are people who've been jailed for that. And so what we can't allow our country to be put in that category. And so those are the kinds of things that we have to remember, in addition to the fact that economically this is suicidal. We have inflation. We have, with all of the changes, the uncertainty, you have no investment or little investment. Unemployment numbers overall have gone down. So all of this is affecting our pocketbooks, but frankly, it's also affecting our deeper core. And I think those are the kinds of things that we've got to take into account going forward.
Yeah, and I tell my listeners often, your mentality. You have to take care of yourself, and sometimes it just means getting away from social medias and finding what really relaxes you, because we are living in tough times. I never thought in the years that I have had where I understood the world a little bit better than when I was a child, I realized that we are in really difficult times. I thought the 80s were difficult towards Latinos. I had no idea what was coming in 2025, 2026. Yep. So I want to thank you, former United Secretary Jose Fernandez, who is with us today. Thank you for your time, your insight, your intelligence, and thank you for serving our country the way you have under the past two administrations. It is a real
Larry,
pleasure.
And muchas gracias for having a conversation that's more than 2-minute snippets. This is important.
Yes,
and I think I'd be happy to come back whenever you invite me.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you for being with us today on this show that's, highlights the concerns of Latinos in our community, as well as our culture, as well as our creativity in America. And I just want to thank everybody for being with me and tuning in each week to this show so that we can bring our concerns to the table. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week here on Mi Gente On Air.
Make your lawn the best